all my paranormal misfits, and welcome to the Paranormal Misfit podcast. I am your host, Chrissy, and I'm here to talk about all things paranormal and spooky. From experience that I or someone else has had, to the shows, movies, and books, to lores and legends, and to the places known for the paranormal. I'm going to talk about all of it. I myself am a believer with a healthy set of skepticism. You'll hear my thoughts and feelings about different topics revolving around the paranormal, so cozy up with your favorite beverage of choice and listen along. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Paranormal Misfits podcast. So last week I talked about, and now I'm drawing a blank. I talked about the Crescent Hotel. There we go. All right. And so this week we're going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite horror movies, and that is An American Haunting. And if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. It was released in the early 2000s, about 2005 time period, and it was directed by, and this is going to show my age a little bit, but the original D&D movie that they made in the early 2000s. And a lot of people thought it was terrible. Kind of was, but it's like a guilty pleasure of mine. So that was really fun to learn. So the director slash writer of the movie is Courtney Solomon. So anyways, so the film is based off a very well-known legend. I know there's been quite a few different paranormal groups who have done investigations. It's been shared. It's a well-known legend, and it is the legend of the Bell Witch. And with this movie, it's also based off of a novel called the same thing, The Bell Witch, An American Haunting, and that is by Brent Monahan. So the way this film starts out is you started out in the 21st century, and there's a recently divorced mom whose daughter wakes up from a really terrible dream, and she screams and she's awake and screams and she awakens, and her mom dismisses it as a dream and reminds her that she has a visit with her father later in the week. And the mom goes back to her desk and she finds a binder full of old letters with a note from someone who claims to be an ancestor, and it appears to be written in the 19th century script. Now, if you know anything about the Bell Witch was about the 19th century in the rural part of Tennessee, I believe. Yeah, Tennessee. So you're going to see a couple of very familiar faces in this film. Donald Sutherland, who most of us probably know him as President Snow from the Hunger Games, but he's in this. We have Sissy Spacek, James Darcy, and then Rachel Hurd-Wood. She's going to be playing Betsy Bell, who happens to, out of the whole Bell family, probably have the worst interactions with the Bell Witch. So anyways, so the story goes back to the early 19th century to show the Bell Witch story. So John Bell is taken to church court and found guilty of theft of a woman's land. The church releases him with the verdict that his loss of honor is a sufficient enough punishment. The offended party, Kate Bates, is infamous in the village due to the claims of her being a witch. So strange occurrences begin to occur, and John believes that Miss Kate has cursed him. Betsy starts looking very sick, and the hauntings get worse. She has a young teacher named Richard Powell who notices the changes in Betsy's behavior. The Bell family tells him that they fear that the cause is paranormal, and that part of that comes from the witch who has cursed them. So Powell attempts to prove that this is impossible because spirits don't exist. It is also implied and kind of gross, but we got to remember this is the 19th century, so women and girls were more so objects than anything. But it's implied that Richard is in love with Betsy. And when you're watching this, Betsy is... if you had to give her an age, I'd say between the end of her preteens to about high school age. But once again, it's the 19th century, and everyone goes to a small wooden school in the middle of the field. So you know. So Richard stays in the Bell home to observe Betsy's behavior. His theory is then proven wrong when he witnesses Betsy dangle in the air as if someone is holding her up by her hair. She is then sexually assaulted by the spirit. John the dad, um, loses his sanity and sees many forms of the Bell Witch. John asks Kate Batts to kill him and remove her curse. She refuses and tells him that he is the one that cursed himself. John then tries to kill himself, but the spirit stops him. Betsy is stuck with the revelation that the attacks on her and her father are caused by a supernatural being who was born out of her innocence. She needs to remember that the true cause of her pain is actually her father's child sexual abuse of her. Lucy, Betsy's mother, has the same revelation because she witnessed the sexual assault, which she and Betsy have repressed. Betsy poisons her now bedridden father with medicine while her mother watches. Betsy is then seen at her father's grave and she is never haunted again. And then it flashes back to the present 21st century where the mom who found the letters, the mom's daughter says her father has come to take her for the weekend to stay. She sends her daughter to her ex-husband who is waiting outside. Betsy's ghost suddenly appears and looks ominous. The mother realizes that Betsy is trying to warn her of something that is amiss between the father and her ex-husband. She runs out of her house to catch a glimpse of her daughter's worried face peering out of the car window as it drives away. The implication is that the father is sexually abusing her, and she runs after her ex's car, frantically yelling his name. Okay, so that's basically the gist of the story, right? Now, what is so fascinating, at least for me, for this movie, is that it does highlight on the legend of the Bell Witch. It was the Bell family who was haunted by the Bell Witch way back when. And there's, quite a few different recordings from that time period and on about the Bell Witch. So that was pretty cool. But what I really do love is that sorry, I have a pen in my hand. I probably shouldn't do that. Okay, so when I watched this movie for the first time, which was like, oh my God, 10 or so years ago, because when I originally bought this movie, I was fresh out of high school and working at Blockbuster as a second part-time job just for the hell of it. And I was like, oh, I'm one of those like CDs, movies, if I've never heard of it, but something about it catches my attention or looks really fucking cool on the cover, I'm just going to go ahead and go get it. And that's how I roll. Sometimes I get really terrible things out of it, and sometimes I get absolute gems. And for me, this was a gem. So anyways, so my first time watching this movie, because I had like shit ton of fucking DVDs that I had the hardest time trying to get through. I'm like, oh, I'll just watch it this weekend, then I'd watch something else, kind of that thing. I have like ADHD, so I either get hyper focused or absolutely scatterbrained. There's no in between for me. So I watched this movie for the first time like 10 years ago when my husband and I started dating, and I remembered this because he was out gaming with some friends. It was like a Saturday summer afternoon. I remember because it was bright outside. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll watch this. It's like a scary movie. Now, for me, I'm just going to let everyone know, I love watching horror flicks. I don't like watching them alone, and I don't like watching them in the dark. I am the absolute biggest scaredy cat, but I love this shit. So anyways, I was over at his apartment, it's like broad daylight out or whatever, and I am completely alone. And while watching it, this movie creeps me the fuck out. Like, absolutely creeps me the fuck out. And it's mainly because, like, these are the genres I really love. I love the poltergeist genres. I love the implications of, like, it being a demonic thing, but it's actually something that's repressed within the person, and it's because of their own terrible actions as the reason why it seems like they're haunted, right? So, like, think of, like, well, no, Malignant's a little bit different. Malignant was awesome. Sorry, another tangent. So for this one, for me, because the dad is doing such a horrid act to the daughter, that is why they're haunted, because he refuses to take accountability for it. He barely gets a slap on the hand for stealing a woman's property, you know? And it's just the whole thing, right? So, like, because of his terrible actions, that's why it's haunting him, because his subconscious is literally taking it out on him. And that's how I feel it went. And it's the same thing for the daughter, because she has repressed this so much that, like, she's absolutely conflicted. And we all know when we repress, like, feelings or terrible things that have happened to us, it boils up inside, and then we have like these outbursts, or something happens to us and we don't understand why, but usually this is why. So anyways, I love the way they did this movie, because it doesn't necessarily, like, it focuses on the Bell Witch, and they're like, oh, the Bell Witch, the Bell Witch, but it doesn't focus so much on the actual legend. It just kind of uses it as like kind of like a cover, right? Like a high cover, yeah, that's the Bell Witch. It happened around this time period. Yeah, it's in the area that it happened in. But here's what it could have been, you know? And I love that. So that is what makes this movie so fascinating to me. And the other part is I really do love I love the legend of the Bell Witch, and I could probably talk on it for like a good hour or so, but I'm not going to do that, because I'm here to talk about the movie An American Haunting, not about the Bell Witch. So, yeah. I think this movie was really well written. I think they did a great job bringing in a different look to it. Not like a look, but a different outlook to it, right? Because, this family went through a lot, and I like the change that it did on it, and the implications that they had, that maybe some of this was brought on by themselves due to something else that they were hiding. Donald Sutherland is the dad. He does a great job. Obviously the man is like stoic, so like him being like that puritanist almost kind of father figure in the 19th century, up on his high horse, obviously makes kind of sense, right? And then Sissy Spacek plays the mom. James Darcy is the teacher, the pedophile teacher. And then you got Rachel Hurtwood, who's Betsy. I really liked it, like, and it does really good with like the poltergeist. You never see, like, it's not like oh, I see an entity or something. There's never anything like that, right? It's just when something happens to Betsy and she's haunted, she's just getting lifted straight up out the air, pulled by her hair, can't see what's going on. It's almost like the poltergeist movies, pretty much. Or like any of those Catholic movies that you see with possession. But yeah, I mean, it's a great fucking movie, and I really think everyone should check it out. I really love that it does the great time period clothing, the area, because it's Tennessee. Pretty sure it's Tennessee. I'll have to look it up. Yeah, it's Tennessee. We're talking about Tennessee, where it's still wild and large spaces, and the stuff, and does a great job. It's like the old this schoolhouse looks like this old schoolhouses you expect to see, which, if you've ever been to St. Augustine here in Florida, they have one of the oldest schoolhouses that's still up and functioning. It's kind of a touristy trap, but yes, Tennessee. Okay. But yeah, so it looks like that. The mannerisms and everything, everyone's sticking to the same thing. They did a great job with the filming of it, because it keeps to like this moody, almost the moody haunting feelings that you get from like most movies like this. I really do love these kind. Like, it reminded me of, if you've ever watched the TV show Salem, kind of reminds me of that, because they'll bring in like the low fog You'll get like the neutral to moody colors. Music, background music was great for it. So yeah, I mean, if you can find it, and I was looking it up earlier to see, because I love telling people, you should check this out, you should do this, you should do that. But we're looking at, for sure, Amazon Prime. But when I looked on Prime, I have a Prime membership, but I don't really use it. So if you got one, use it. It's on there. Vudu and Tubi. I love Tubi. The only thing with Tubi is if you can get past the commercials that it has, then you're doing great, right? Now, if you want to see anything, and I'm only going to go on this a little bit, if you want to see anything that also kind of revolves around this, so they insinuate that the Blair Witch Project is kind of like a loose, per se, interpretation of this. There's another Bell Witch movie called Bell Witch Haunting, American Haunting, Bell Witch the movie. So apparently from 2004 to 2008, we really wanted to push out the Bell Witch Haunting. There's the Bell Witch Legend, but that's more of a documentary. There's a horror movie that's done in like the found footage, so think like Blair Witch Project, called The Bell Witch Haunting. And then in 2020, there was another documentary made called The Mark of the Bell Witch. Now, I'll probably go over these at a later point in time, because that sounds really interesting. But at the same time, it'll probably be while I cover the Bell Witch, which probably won't be until maybe October. Yeah, maybe October. So anyways, so a couple of films that they've also kind of grouped this one in around the same kind of thing would be like Poltergeist, Paranormal Activity, when you're thinking, because they're kind of putting them all together because of Poltergeist Activity, obviously, because in Bell Witch, or not the Bell Witch, but in American Haunting, you don't see a physical witch doing it all, right? So, Poltergeist, Paranormal Activity, The Witch, a little bit of Amityville Horror, and a movie called Mama. I haven't watched that. That sounds really interesting. Now, if you want to check out some paranormal investigators looking into this, I do know our lovely men from Ghost Adventures definitely did. They went into the caves. It's called the Bell Witch Cave. There's American Monsters, entitled Forest Monsters, Mothman, and the Bell Witch. There's a television series that was on A&E called Cursed, the Bell Witch. Travel Channel has another one called Haunted Live that, let's see, features a paranormal investigative team, the Team Wrath Chasers, visiting a town of Adams, Tennessee, where the descendants of the Bell family take them to the cabin. And then Expedition X also explores the caves and goes over the legend a little bit in the middle of Tennessee. Expedition X I absolutely love because that is a Josh Gates, and I am a huge stan for Josh Gates. He is my absolute favorite. So, but anyways, so take the time, watch the movie. I'm gonna look and see if I can find this book because that sounds awesome. But I love reading. But yeah, so watch the movie. It's an American Haunting. Tubi, Prime, and Vudu for sure. I'll have them. I think I'm saying that right. VUDU, Voodoo, View. Yeah. Anyways, so I hope you'd enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think. If you have watched the movie, send me a message. Let me know. How did you like it? If you haven't checked it out and then you check it out after this episode, once again, hit me up. Let me know what you thought. And that's it for tonight's episode. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye. Well, that concludes this episode of the Paranormal Misfits. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on whichever platform you're listening to on. And give me a follow on Instagram at Paranormal Misfit. If you have your own spooky paranormal story you'd like to share or want to hear about a particular lore, place, or whatnot, please feel free to drop me a DM in Instagram. And on that note, I will catch you all later at the next episode, my ghouls.